We're going to talk about the embarrassment of children.
Mm,
So we can
okay.
kind of dive right in here. There are stories going around the internet right now. The one making the one making the rounds right now is this kid who this barber is, in order to teach kids a lesson, is offering the Benjamin Button special. And parents of bad children, or not bad children, misbehaving children, can be brought in to this barber, and he will shave their head to make them look like they're an old man. And it's kind of like this negative reinforcement. So you're publicly embarrassing your child to elicit the response of good behavior out of them. And so that raises the question: is public embarrassment of children the best way of disciplining them? And I know that only Kara and I have children, but we've all been children at one point or another and have undergone discipline in one way or another. So we can talk about our own backgrounds and whatnot. So yeah, public embarrassment of children in the internet age, especially, good for? Is this a good way to elicit the response of obedience from children?
I mean, I think no. Um, I think that I'd have a hard time saying. I think I'd have a hard time saying no, never. Because I mean, sometimes kids do itch, which is just embarrassing, and yeah, they should take the natural fallout for that when they do something which is embarrassing. Um, but I mean, like going out of your way to intentionally shame a child, especially publicly. Um, I mean, it's going to compound the bullying issue. It gives kids who are bullies a natural way to do that. When you look at your parent authority figures or other adult authority figures, and you see that they are using shame as a valid way to motivate behavior, it's sort of like seeing violence used as a valid way to motivate behavior. But shame is shame. Like I think even with spanking, there's a degree where it's like, well, punching a kid at school is categorically different from spanking him on the butt. Um, but like setting up a kid to look completely stupid in front of all of his friends, that begins to get into stuff that's a lot more muddy. Why is it okay for adults to do this, but not for kids to do it? I mean, I thought the post was funny. Um, But I mean, I think South Park's funny. Just because it's hilarious doesn't mean I advocate doing it. Um, my thoughts and feelings on that are that.
I pretty much agree with you, David. That was my initial response to the article, and I mean that kind of stuff's been around a long time. Like people putting their kids on the corner with a sandwich board that says, I'm a liar or I shoplift. And I saw like a 2020 special on that a few years back. So it's kind of the idea has been around for a while of publicly shaming your children, and social media makes it a lot easier to do that for a lot more people, which I mean, I think that's part of the problem is the internet never goes away. So there can be a picture of somebody with a old man haircut at, their boss can find when they're at a job interview, later in life. And it's kind of like, oh, I guess parents are probably thinking, I want them to think about that. But for me, I don't know. I don't feel like that's appropriate unless the punishment fits the crime. I mean, I feel like punishment should go hand in hand with what was done. And so if a child or a teenager was publicly embarrassing, whatever, be appropriate for the parent to say, here's a little bit a taste of your own medicine. How does it feel to be publicly embarrassed? Not good. So don't treat people like that. But for me, like the correlation, it's good. It's for their own good to understand. Like you need to think about how it feels to be somebody else, not just you did something bad and you should be really embarrassed about it.
Yeah, when I was a kid, oh wow. When I was a kid, I this didn't happen to me. It happened to my brother. So I hope to God he doesn't listen to this episode. Well, who am I kidding? I don't think he's ever listened to any episode. But uh, I remember school getting out, the bell ringing, and we're all running out to the bus. This is when I lived in Japan, and this kid came running up to me, just laughing. "Oh my God, Kevin! Oh my God, you're not gonna believe what happened. Kevin, your brother Chris got his butt beat in class." And I was like, "What?" And I come to find out that my brother had been acting up in class. The teacher called my mom, and mom came down to the school, pulled my brother's pants down in front of his entire class, and spanked him in front of the whole class. Now we can go round and round about whether spanking's okay or not. That's not what this conversation's about. But it was publicly embarrassing. It was very, very public. I mean, it's humiliating, right? There he is in his Superman underoos, getting his butt spanked in front of the entire class. Now, bear in mind, whatever it was that he did, he never did it again. More kids, more, we never got spanked for the same thing twice, ever. We had to find new ways. Like, we always learned our lesson when we got spanked. Oh, okay, don't do that. Mom does not like that. And then we'd find something else out that mom didn't like. But there was that public embarrassment, there was that public shaming, and we're well-adjusted people. My brother is not like freaked out by it now. I mean, we're all adults, we've grown up, and we're fine. And we kind of look at our own kids and we're like, if our kids acted up, we'd probably do something similar. But Kara, I think what you brought up is interesting, in that this stuff lives on forever because of the internet age. Now, if my mom had gone to school and spanked my brother, and there was somebody there with a camera phone, and now it's on the internet for the rest of his life, then that's following him. So I think discipline in the form of public embarrassment in the internet age follows you, and I think that tends to be more the issue for me than the public embarrassment. I think public shaming is fine. I think shaming is fine. Kids need to feel shame, because there are so many kids who feel zero shame. Shame is not a bad thing. It's a matter of, do you allow that shame to characterize that person's life? Like that thing that you did, you should be ashamed of that. You should feel shame. I don't want you to feel shame until you're like 30, but right now in this moment you should feel shame. And with the
thing is,
internet, I feel like the shame continues with
there's a
them
lot
for the
of
rest of
child
their life.
psychology which goes into shame, and there's a lot of shame instilled in a child disproportionately more compared to the rest of their life, and especially with sensitive children, shame at an earlier age can have long-standing psychological impacts on that child's development. You have to be very, very careful about shaming children from a child psychology perspective, because the school which I went to, if I had been publicly shamed, that shame wouldn't have gone away. Things which are moderately embarrassing from fifth grade saved me all the way to the end of middle school, to the point where by the time high school changed around, I completely changed my wardrobe, changed my hair, and changed the way I talk so they won't recognize me.
Right, and I don't
But
think.
that's the environment. Much less when a kid's 6 and he goes through shaming. That's a bigger portion of his identity as a 6-year-old than it would be for an adult.
Sure. And I don't think that you should do something that's debilitating. What you're saying, I think, is valid, because you're saying, you have to be very, very careful. What I think happens oftentimes when people say you have to be very, very careful, and I'm not trying to say that this is you, but what I have seen happen is people say, oh, you have to be very, very careful, and that's coded language for, let's not do it at all, because we don't know how to do it right. So let's not do it at all, because we don't want this kid to feel shame. And it is different for every kid, because I'm like, you know what? I was shamed. I'm fine. I'm good. I'm well adjusted. My life is great. I'm not out shooting up schools. I'm not, completely debilitated and curled up into a fetal position for the rest of my life because I can't get over what happened to me when I was 6. But at the same time, someone else might have a completely different psychological makeup, and something might still carry on into their life, from when they were 6 to now. That's not to say that there aren't things in my life that carry with me from high school. There's still some issues that I have that carry from me and my identity from high school. Nothing to do with shaming, but I do think that things can follow you, and every person is different.
And I
Amy?
think there's a difference between feeling shame and shaming your child. I mean, I think those are different things. Like you were saying, Calvin, there is absolutely a role for shame in our life, even as a young child. I mean, even my 2-year-old, knows when he does something wrong. The other day I came upstairs and he met me at the top of the stairs and he said, "Naughty baby," and then he led me to like where he had unplugged all the DVD cords. He pointed like naughty baby, like he knew. He was showing me I did something naughty, and yet you did. Okay, and your punishment is you have to help me pick it up now. Um, it's an appropriate punishment. You take it apart, we put it back together. The shame isn't bad. My mom actually told me the story, but she was in Target and there was a mom there with her young child who was having a temper tantrum, and the child's going off, and that's something that always stresses me out because I feel like a lot of embarrassment myself. Like people are gonna think I'm a bad mom because I can't control my child. But what this mom was saying to her child was, you're making a scene. Look, you're embarrassing yourself. So you need to quiet down. You're embarrassing yourself. And I thought like that's such a great approach rather than saying like I'm embarrassed, please shut up, or here take whatever you want so you'll be quiet, but rather like what you're doing right now is having an effect on how people see you. So just think about that, like even from a young age. And I thought that was a really cool approach.
My question for you, Kara, would be, did that change the child's behavior at all? Like, did they stop crying and settle down when she said that?
I honestly don't know. I don't know, and I don't know if that was necessarily even the point. I think the point was to kind of not let herself feel the shame that was actually on her child.
Yeah, that's kind of where this whole thing becomes a bigger issue for me, just in these parents who would shave their kid with head with some ugly hairdo as a means of punishment. On the one hand, you kind of have to applaud the creativity that goes behind that, because that's the kind of lengths that our society as a whole has driven people to in order to reprimand their children. When back in my day, if I was crying in a store like that, I would have been hauled into, out to the car and had my butt spanked. And you can't do that nowadays. I mean, that's the sad fact, is parents have to go to a lot more lengths like this, putting your kid in timeout. And I remember seeing this with my nephew. He's 3 years old, and my sister-in-law would tell him, to go sit in his room and think about what he did. He's 3 years old. He doesn't have the reasoning skills to sit in his room and realize it's supposed to be a punishment and a time for reflection and corrective behavior. He's going to go to his room and play with his toys and things. It's just...
Wait, but there's again some child psychology stuff in there. That is just straight up not true. The 3-year-olds don't have the cognitive capacity to understand that. They absolutely do. Now, they might not have the cognitive capacity to sit still for that long, but they can definitely understand cause and effect punishment. I babysat toddlers. They get it. And that's just my personal experience, not to mention, like I said, a lot of child psychology goes into this. The other thing about that is I think saying that this is causally connected to the degree to which society is driving parents to do one thing or another right now, I just don't think that's accurate. I think that you can say that there are more limited options in terms of corporal punishment for children. That's true. But in most states, you can still spank your child within reason. And the bottom line is that most of my friends who have kids of various ages are not struggling with trying to find appropriate to the crime methods of punishment. My brothers and I were those kids at Walmart who threw temper tantrums. We threw temper tantrums because we had learning disability and auditory processing disabilities and autism. And you take a kid who's got autism and you say, well, I can't spank you, so because I can't spank you, I'm going to shave your head bald and send you to school. Like, that would not make things better. That would make things so much worse, because there's so much shame which already goes into what's causing the underlying behavior. Those behaviors don't occur in isolation.
Right. I don't think they happen in isolation, but I think also what you're doing there, David, I think is fair and a little unfair. I'll say it's fair in that there are a lot of parents who have kids who have issues, and they take it out on their kids in some way, shape, or form, which is not right. But then you also do have a lot of people who do know, like in your case, you and your brother had specific issues. I think you do have enough parents out there who are compassionate enough to know, look, my kid has autism. My kid has, behavioral issues, that have nothing to do with this temper tantrum that's happening right now. And so they're not going to take their kid to the barber and get their head shaved because they know that their child has specific issues that can only be dealt with in certain ways. But I think for the majority of people, you're dealing more with a kid who doesn't normally have behavioral issues, doesn't have any psychological issues that we know of, is able to understand right from wrong to a degree, and they just cut up and they did something. They talked back to mom. Mom said, clean your room. Kid said, no, I'm not going to clean the room. Said something, right? And so they're like, all right, you're going to go get your head shaved. And so I think that's really the audience.
I think that's an exact example. I think a response where the crime, the punishment doesn't match the crime. You talked back to me, so I'm going to shave your head and shame you in public. That looks like bullying. That doesn't look like parenting. But that wasn't my point.
Well, I mean, it's a far cry from taking your kid outside.
The connection between the prioritization of corporal punishment and the rise of public shaming. And case in point, shaming kids in public existed as a thing before corporal punishment was prioritized.
I mean, you have to remember, this is still a far cry from, what the punishment was like in the Old Testament. They're like, rebellious kids, take them outside the camp and stone them to death.
That's kind of a dumb argument for two
reasons.
I
mean, it's not. I'm just saying.
Law. The Levitical law describes the severity of the punishment and not the didactic reason for the punishment.
David.
The second one is that you're taking a Hammurabian-style code and applying it to what's good parenting according to what we know with modern child psychology is just a silly argument. They don't compare. You can't compare.
No, okay, so here's the deal. Okay, people will say things like this, and this isn't necessarily connected, so it is somewhat apples to oranges here, but allow me.
No, it's completely apples to oranges.
No. I haven't even given the example yet, so give me a moment. Okay.
Okay.
So, someone says, "What's okay in the bedroom?" Blah blah blah. Private, right? Okay. No. You can't. I'm not going to say anything about what people do in the bedroom because it's their own private business. Okay. Disciplining children. I'm going to give you all the advice of what is right and wrong in terms of how you raise your kids, what you do to your children, because this is what I believe psychologically is happening to a child, even though I don't know anything about your child. I don't know anything about your situation. I want to say that this does not fit the crime. It could fit the crime.
Yeah,
it could very well fit the crime. And very often I think punishment does fit the crime.
That probably doesn't fit the crime. I would say that almost carte blanche doesn't fit the crime. The other thing is on this show, we do talk about what's right and wrong in the bedroom. And we are talking about what's right and wrong to do to children. And we're using generalized ideas. We need to pull in more than just our opinion, and that entails child psychology. That also entails not making false causal connections, which is my whole point, that there's not a causal connection there. And honestly, I agree with Tara 100% entirely, that if a child is bullying someone else, if a child is shaming other children, that public shaming is a great response to that. Like, there's clearly a place for it, but the place for it is where it fits the crime.
What's the line of demarcation for you then? That's my question. If you're saying the punishment must fit the crime, you must have a list of these crimes and these punishments all fit each other. These are all corollary.
I mean,
so what is your line of demarcation?
Yeah,
you don't need to have a Talmudic list.
I say, as far as that goes, I mean, there is a lot you can read as far as like punishment fitting the crime. It's kind of a whole parenting disciplinary style that I haven't done a ton of reading up on, but I know enough about to say, I mean, you are getting more creative rather than something wrong, spanking, something wrong, spanking. You're just a little bit more creative in trying to help the child understand. You elicited this response in someone else, so let me help you understand what that means. And just kind of, it's a learning as you discipline kind of thing.
I mean, I approve so much of that style of discipline. It's hard for me to understate, because that's what was done for me. And it is, my looking back on how my parents punished me is one of the fondest memories in terms of my parents just did right by me with that.
It's important to point out, I think, in this specific article we read, and I feel like most people would go this way, that the public shaming thing was a last resort. The barber did say that, that he's not going to just like take somebody in because they just talk back to their parents. it's a last resort. A parent, like he said, a single mom came in to me. He didn't know what to do with her son. I'm the only male role model in his life, so he came into me. We talked. I taught him a lesson. I gave him this embarrassing haircut. And I'm not. I don't know that kid. I don't know what he's like. Who's to say? It might have really spoken to him to have a male figure in his life that he really respects. Tell him like, this is appropriate because you are having this kind of behavior, and I will do it if you do it again. Your mom's not in this alone. Maybe that was a situation. I mean, that's of course a very specific instance, but I mean, it is hard to judge without knowing like the full scope of the story. But I appreciated that he said that it was a last resort kind of thing.
Amy?
Yes. I'm still here.
I just seen if you had any thoughts.
I'm not talking a lot because I'm nursing a sore throat here. No, my thoughts would be as the oldest of the four of us, like I appreciate what David said in terms of his life experience growing up and the way he was punished as a child. He has very fond memories of that because it was successful for him, and I can just tell him that and tell everybody my childhood experience was 100% the opposite, and it was equally effective and very well done. And I mean, let's face it, I come from a family tree full of vigilantes, so we're all about corporal punishment.
Are you related to Batman?
In many shapes and forms. So yeah, I just think, I mean, if I had a kid, would I shave their head? No, probably not. Unless, like Kara said, it was a last resort measure in that specific instance. But the whole idea of public shaming is, I mean, it's nothing new. So it's been around for centuries. I mean, like you said, there's tons of precedents for it. So when or where it's not appropriate, I think it's an individual call. I don't know what else it can be.
Yeah, and I think it definitely is very different for each child. And this is where I'll give this to you, David. At least I found in parenting with my daughter. She has an older sister. I'm not the biological father of her older sister, but there are ways that we could discipline her older sister when I was still married. We could discipline her older sister that would devastate my daughter. And so we realized, okay, the first daughter, she's there, and we've already been disciplining her, and we've figured out, this is what works. This is what works, this is what doesn't work. And so the second child comes along, and you're like, well, we already figured out what works, and we forget, this is a completely different person. So I think for some, the whole punishment fits a crime, ancillary, a proportionate response to disobedience. I think for one kid, shaving their head, the punishment might fit the crime for them, and it's not going to devastate that kid. Another kid, the punishment might fit the crime, but that particular punishment might devastate that child for the rest of their life, whether it's on the internet or not. And again, we're talking in extremes. There is, child psychology that goes into some of this, but I don't want to think that, shaving a child's head is going to lead them to, prison, or lead them to shoot up their school, or lead them to loathe their parents for the rest of their life. I don't want to go that extreme, but I also don't want to assume that people who don't spank their children are also doing the same thing, raising murderers, and people who are going to shoot up their schools because they're just disobedient and were never disciplined. So it's kind of like this weird tightrope. But when it does come down to having more than one kid, or having just one kid, you really need to figure out what does and doesn't work with children. For me, spanking didn't work as well with me as it worked with my older brother. And my younger brother, he was just really, really, really sensitive, and so he was a person who you could talk to and just say, "You've disappointed me." Like, that was way worse than spanking him. Saying "you've disappointed me," that would ruin him. And so I think when it comes down to it, it's just kind of like, the whole disciplining thing, public embarrassment, people are going to come down in different places, and I really am loath to to judge anyone in terms of, would I do something? Maybe, maybe not. But I'm really loath to judge when someone else does something. The internet age was notwithstanding, I really want to kind of step back from judging someone as right or wrong on a particular way of parenting and discipline. Okay.
Yeah, I think that's valid.
All right. I guess we will end on that note. I actually said something smart. That's crazy.
Yeah.
All right. Wow.